Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Azeroth Daily for the 11th of May 2011. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of WoW news and comment. In the headlines today, the 4.2 PTR has been updated with a new patch which includes some basic raid testing. We're expected to be able to test the first boss of the Firelands tonight at 1930 Paris time, assuming that it will actually let us on. Currently there's a bug on the PTR which is preventing an awful lot of people from logging in with an error that says character of that name already exists. There is currently no fix to this error, and that may delay the recording of the raid testing tonight. Just bear in mind that I do have every intention of getting on there and actually testing the raid content and providing you with Wipeathon 3000 and hopefully a kill guide as well. You can check out the full PTR changes in the description below this video. Blizzard reminds everyone that sharing your password with people is a really terrible idea, and that Blizzard will never, ever, ever ask you for your account password. They do not need it, and it's not wise to hand it out to your friends and family as well. It's an interesting approach, honestly. It's not turning around and saying, oh, well, account sharing is going to get you banned. It's more of a scare tactic saying, oh, well, maybe your friends and family aren't quite as careful as you are, and you'll end up losing your account that way. It's an interesting approach in the continued information war that Blizzard is waging on this particular problem, and I don't really object to them using that. Educating people is a good thing. The problem is that the people they're aiming at are the kind of people that also don't read the website. There's also a bunch of tips right here if you're unsure as to what the best password choice might be, and you can read all of those in the description below this video. The latest round of EU community news has come out, and it is focused once again on foreign language sites, including Italian craft battlecraft.it. It's having a look at some inventory management add-ons, as well as different phases of the Arena Pass in Italian, and the Czech and Slovak site wildfan.cz offering a chance to win a game card, and also WoW Hungary has updated their Learn to Play section with 2 new beginner's guides. Whole lot of other foreign language news, as well as a roundup of this week's comics and noteworthy forum threads available in the description below this video. And with that, it's time for your Daily Blues. We have yet more information on the subject of the Snorenderi, as someone so cleverly pointed out, and what I'm specifically looking at right now is information that's come from Daxari, which will give you some insight as to how this is actually going to work. He points out that the shards, whatever they might take the form of, will probably not have a 100% drop rate. They don't tend to do that because they like a little bit of randomness, but it will be high enough to ensure that the law of averages makes things average out quite nicely. He also answers the criticism that they're not developing content for all the players and just a tiny minority of them by saying that they actually do develop content for the player base at large all the damn time, and indeed the majority of content that's coming in 4.2, i.e. the Regrowth and Molten Front Quest Hub, is designed for all players in mind. And also answers a concern about its use in PvP by saying that there probably will be too few of them for it to make any real difference. However, if it does, they will probably do something to stop it working so well in competitive PvP. Now, if only they would apply that design principle to everything else, like for instance changing abilities because of PvP and having that negatively affect PvE content. That will be wonderful. Bandito complains that the game has gotten too complicated and points out that Blizzard has made it so, and the evidence that he uses to justify that opinion is that there are boss kill guide videos. Okay. There are boss kill guide videos for every game known to man. I'd just like to point this out. This is the nature of the current media-consuming internet world that we live in. There are videos for everything. Some people need to use guides, some people do not. That does not mean the game is too complicated. It means the game might be a little bit challenging, so some people might have to look at some guides. Nobody is forcing you to do so. He claims that they've complicated the game to the point where it requires studying in order to actually play it. Somehow I beg to differ on that particular matter. Lilira responds by saying, what exactly do you mean by study? Are you referring to the normal learning curve, or are you implying that the only way to do raid content is by spending countless hours poring over manuscripts? And I would have to agree with this particular idea. You do not, in fact, have to do anything of the sort. It is reasonably simple to learn most of, if not all of the normal modes without using any guides whatsoever. Why do I know this? Because we did it in the beta. We made the guides. It wasn't that hard to figure out. You're just like, okay, this ability does X, so we do Y. It's not really that difficult. It's mostly common sense, honestly, and using rational thinking. Lilira points out that the Dungeon Journal in 4.2 should give you more information about the boss before you go in there, so that you won't have to watch as many guide videos, although I have a feeling that people still will, but it's nice to see that information in the game nonetheless. She also goes on to point out that what was said by Bandito on the subject of encounters just having several rules like stand here, don't stand there, jump up, cluster here, all being pointless, is that applies to pretty much every task, including, say, playing almost any video game and things like music as well. Yes, you are required to do the right thing at the right time. That's just the way that it works. Now, the next post from Lilira is really interesting because it gives some information about some of the upcoming daily quests, and some of them do look quite good. Burn Victims is one you've probably already seen on my channel. If you haven't, then you can go and watch it in the Firelands daily video that I did. And there's one called Strike at the Heart, which has randomized bosses, all of which have raid-style environmental damage. There's even going to be an achievement currently named Ready for Raiding 2 for killing all 5 of those random bosses without taking damage from the avoidable environmental effects. It's nice stuff. I like that idea. That's really, really good indeed. There's also other stuff like the Flawless Victory achievement, asking players to solo kill a Molten Behemoth found in the Molten Front without taking any damage from 2 of its abilities. That's Molten Stop and Fiery Boulder. That's pretty cool. This is the kind of thing that I said they should be adding, and I'm hoping to see an awful lot more of that, particularly as we actually level up, as opposed to just having it at 85. It's nice to be able to get some of this experience and knowledge before setting foot in a raid dungeon. And with that, it's time for your daily grind. I'd like to point out here one of the stupidest quests I've ever seen in my life. It's called A Perfect Costume, and it's part of the J.J. Keishan line in the Burning Steps. And this one requires you to take the appropriate amount of supplies from the table and give them to the tailor in order to make your disguise. However, he's extremely picky. You pick the wrong number of any of the supplies, he will refuse to make anything for you, which is kind of dumb, really. I mean, I understand not bringing enough hides. That's reasonable. But bringing too much mud? Why don't you then just not use the mud? Is that okay? Can you just not do that? Oh, you brought 4 piles of mud. Well, that means that I have to use it all. No, jackass! What are you talking about? That's a terrible idea. This guy is such a picky, irritating little... Ugh. Oh, man. And look at that. He's wearing a pink shirt. You can't trust the tailor that wears a pink shirt. And with that, it's time for your weekly feature. This is the Court of Law. We continue our lore series on the capital cities of World of Warcraft by talking a little bit about Thunder Bluff and, of course, the Tauren race. The plains of Kalimdor have long been a home to these tremendous nomads. The Tauren are a race of shaman, hunters, and warriors who long ago developed a complex culture and a system of living without the aid of stonework, steel, or conquest. The Tauren race is presumed to be as old as the Night Elves, since both races are said to have awoken during the creation of the world. Much like the Elves, they have a strong attunement to nature and the elemental spirits. Thus, their society is largely based on shamanism. They live to serve nature and maintain the ever-delicate balance between the wild things of the land and the restless spirits of the elements. In addition, elements of Druidism, which was taught by Cenarius and then forgotten over millennia, have been recently incorporated into Tauren society, further highlighting their service to nature. Tauren have a long and complex oral tradition that has been handed down for generations. Since almost no written records exist of Tauren history, the accuracy of their tales is unknown. Regardless, many of the stories provide the only known knowledge for several events in history, and so these stories must be regarded as having at least some believability. Most noticeable are the presence of accounts regarding Cenarius before he was known to the Elves and are confirmed by other sources as being accurate. In particular, the birth of Cenarius is covered and their version confirmed by Night Elven mythos. In the original timeline, the Tauren did not take part in the War of the Ancients, the battle against the first demonic invasion approximately 10,000 years ago. However, in the alternate timeline created by the intervention of Krasus and his companions, they were convinced to join the alliance against the Burning Legion by the Dragon Mage. The xenophobic Night Elf commander Desdal Stareye refused to use the Tauren to their abilities, namely heavy melee fighters, on the grounds that they were apparently as likely to kill Night Elves and Earthen as they were the demons. After the tragic loss of the commander, the Tauren were redeployed to extreme effectiveness by his replacement, Jarod Shadowsong. The Tauren who survived the war maintained fairly good or at least cordial relations with the Sentinels. For countless generations after the war, the Tauren roamed the plains of the Barrens, hunting the mighty Kodo, and sought the wisdom of their eternal goddess, the Earth Mother. Their tent cities were scattered across the landscape and changed with the seasons and the weather. The wandering tribes were united only by a common hatred for their sworn enemy, the marauding Centaur. After being forced by the Centaur to the brink of extinction, the chieftain Cairn Bloodhoof, desperate for help, turned to the strange green-skinned warriors from over the sea. Cairn quickly befriended the war chief Thrall and the other orcs, and recognized that they shared a love for honor and battle. For their part, the orcs and the Darkspear trolls that composed the horde found much in common with the Tauren. Each of these races wanted to achieve a more shamanistic culture, and the Tauren, long versed in the lore of spirit and nature, were well prepared to provide counsel and support to the budding shamanism within the Horde. With the Orcs' help, Cairn and his Bloodhoof tribe were able to drive back the Centaur and claim the grasslands of Mulgore for themselves. For the first time in millennia, the Tauren had a land to call their own. For this alone, they were forever indebted to their Orcish allies, and upon the windswept mesa of Thunder Bluff, Cairn built a refuge for his people, where Tauren of every tribe were welcome. Over time, the scattered Tauren tribes united under Cairn's rule. There were a few tribes who disagreed about the direction their new nation should take, but all agreed that Cairn was the wisest and best suited to lead them toward the future. Helping the mighty Cairn in the duties of ruling his race were the Archdruid Hamel Rune Totem and the Elder Crone Magatha Grim Totem. However, with the events of the Cataclysm, the treachery of the Grim Totem tribe, no sooner had Bane Bloodhoof assumed the position of chieftain after his father's death than the Tauren find themselves under siege by the Alliance incursion into the Barrens. Cut off from the outside world, Goblin airships now provide the only regular means of transportation to and from Mulgore. And with that, it's time for the mailbox. This one comes in from Joel. It says, "Hey TB, this letter is in concern to the new Call to Arms feature put in with patch 4.1. Now, I'm all for this, and I think it's a great addition to help improve queue times, most of the time, but I feel it encourages tanks to break away from their guild and queue strictly solo so that they can benefit from it. Now, I know you are bound to get better and smoother run if you do it with the guild, but with all the nerfs to heroic dungeons and buffs players getting, namely the 15% damage and healing health increase from the random dungeon finder, it hardly matters anymore for the regular Cataclysm heroic dungeons. What I would like to know is, what is your opinion on this, and do you think that they should have the Satchel of Exotic Mysteries able to be earned, even if you queue for Call to Arms with 2 extra people from your guild, as you're still shortening the queue times for 2 to 3 other people? I think that the Call to Arms feature in its current state, and the fact that they are, as you say, encouraging guild tanks to move away from their guild and to go into pug groups, is a fairly disgraceful attitude, bearing in mind that for the longest time they were saying, oh, Cataclysm is going to be the guild expansion. We're going to encourage guild play as much as possible. And then they put a system into the game that it's arguable that you could say that it punishes you for being in a guild. And I know that might take it to a little bit of an extreme, but if you look at what happens at the end of the series of events, then by being in a guild and by grouping with guildies, you do not gain as many rewards as you would for not grouping with guildies. I don't think that there should be anything within the game that encourages that. For instance, there's a bunch of different problems with the random dungeon finder that I find in terms of the way that it works with guilds. The fact that your character becomes more powerful if you don't queue with other guild members, for instance, that being what you've just mentioned. And I understand why it's there, but the result is still the same. You are a more powerful character if you do not go with your guild, as opposed to if you did. That is a problem. Another problem being the fact that, as a guild, you cannot use the random dungeon finder if one of the members of your group is below the required item level, even though as a guild, that should be your decision. So you are penalized and unable to gain valor points in the way that you would be able to otherwise if you were actually queuing with the random dungeon finder. And now you've got a situation where if you queue with your guildies, you do not receive the satchel, which contains the chance of a mount, non-combat pet, as well as potions and all sorts of other useful items. Once again, the actual end result of that is you are punished for grouping with your guild. Now, some people might say, oh, well, you're not punished for grouping with your guild, you're rewarded for going with people that aren't in your guild. The thing is, they are effectively the same thing, and I disagree with that. Once again, this comes down to the very simple fact that people are not queuing as tanks. Why is that? If it's a bad job, if it's something that they don't want to do, if it's something they find unenjoyable, then no amount of carrots on sticks is going to encourage people to do it. Like saying, oh, you know this burger flipping job you've got over at McDonald's? Well, if we gave you this extra little trinket at the end of every week, surely the job will be better. No, the job is still not better. It just gives you a larger reward. Now, once again, some people might say, well, surely that's the point of a job. Yes, you're right, and this isn't a job, it's a video game. And if you are trying to force people to tolerate your video game, there is something inherently wrong with your video game. Video games are designed to have fun, not to be tolerated. That's absurd. What a ridiculous idea to waste your free time on something that you can only merely tolerate and don't actually find fun. This one comes in from Nagati that says, on your last Azeroth Daily, you were discussing the idea of the Hearth here, Hearth back system, and eventually concluded that the entire world getting smaller would hurt the immersion. Now, you also said that Cataclysm gave the option to take a look at the world from above with Flight Master's licenses, and that offered further immersion in the game as a whole, but I can't help but disagree. I play on a laptop, as do many of my friends and others I know. We have to play on low settings in order to get a manageable experience, so when we're flying over zones, we see nothing but fog, where you see amazing views. What I'm trying to say here is that for some players, perhaps a minority, they don't get the immersion out of flying that others would, rather pulling us away from the world around us and purely just focusing on the purpose of what to do when we get there. Also, another thing is the ability now to just get to a specific point just by auto-flying in a direction of where you want to go, drop in and auto-fly back out. There just seems to be a lack of adventure in the whole ordeal. I remember Vanilla having a great perspective on having to fight off monsters, keeping to roads, and watching the terrain change before me as I changed from zone to zone, which I found made the travel a lot more epic in a sense. My question is, do you think the adventure in WoW has disappeared as time goes on? I mean, in the sense that as travel becomes less and less of a conquest with just direct flying, skipping over zones in order to get to the place you want to do, and then do your business and bail. It's a problem, certainly. I think that there are a lot of great memories from having to ride around and stick to roads. I like that a lot because there was a sense of danger. There is no sense of danger when you fly. That said, I think that by the time you've maybe gotten to 85, the whole sense of danger thing has maybe gotten a little bit old and actually doesn't really exist because you can run through pretty much any zone and not aggro much. I mean, the only exceptions would be, say, Twilight Highlands and maybe Oldham at level 85, where stuff would still aggro if you got fairly close to it, and those areas aren't really covered in roads anyway because they're designed to be flown around. It's a shame that it's gotten to that point, but I think maybe it was a little bit inevitable. As regards to the laptops thing, I would just like to point out to people that having a laptop doesn't mean you have to run on low settings. It just means that often people with laptops have laptops that are not quite good enough. I mean, for instance, my laptop runs everything on Ultra, yes, la-di-da. But whatever the case, it's something that is often a very odd preconception that laptops will run the game badly. That's not actually true. A laptop can have all sorts of different specs. It's unfortunate that you can't get a cool sense of immersion by flying over the world. I still do. I still think it's awesome to be able to fly over a really large world like that, but I don't think that's a valid reason for putting in something like Hearth in, Hearth back, since that's a technical problem that could be solved over time simply by having a better computer as opposed to any kind of genuine design issue. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thanks a lot for watching Azeroth Daily. Please remember to thumb it up and favorite it if you like it. Keep an eye on the channel over the next few days for hopefully more PTR content, and I will see you next time.